Welcome to another edition of the Get Made podcast. As always, I got a treat for y'all. So I had this thought that I need to bring somebody on here who can answer some questions, maybe help us out with some better understanding of terminologies that seem to be floating around and causing us some stress, right? Because a couple of weeks ago, well, actually, it's a few months ago, but the video came out where myself, a host of a program, and my wife was having had a conversation, a dialogue that took place, and it started based upon the fact that he was asking me, was I toxic? It asked me, did I have any toxic traits, anything in nature there, right? Which would mean something, but obviously I know he didn't know to say that. Only thing he knew that asking me, was I toxic, right? And so, which I told him, no, I wasn't. No, I'm not. I'm not poisonous, right? So, of course, that spurred a conversation that took place, and then which then got my wife involved, in which I think he even to the day regret doing that one, but nevertheless, that video went viral, right? But my idea behind it, I thought about was, hey, you know what? This is a problem that actually affects more people than we really realize. And as men, not people in general, but as men specifically, we take on a lot of labels that really kind of hinder our growth. And some of the stuff we now start internalizing. So I wanted to bring on Michelle, everyone's favorite therapist, to kind of let's start diving in some of these things and let's start answering some of these questions. So, Michelle, how you doing? Glad to have you back at the Get Made podcast.
And Alhamdulillah, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. And I'm glad that when I called you, you didn't shut it down or anything. You like, yeah, of course, let me check my husband first. But yeah, I ain't got no problem. I'll do it. Right. So I'm glad that you actually even see the need for something like this to take place.
Absolutely, because I did witness see the video, and I think that the problem that we have is we had this idea that everyone has to have some toxic trait. Someone has to be toxic. And I'm glad that you used the word poisonous because that's what toxic traits are poisonous. Everyone has problems, but everybody's not poisonous and go around damaging and bleeding on everyone.
Okay, so we jumping dead into it. Now I was told that I'm gonna start doing this, so I gotta give you the first, I gotta give you the Get Made podcast questions. I'm
Mm,
gonna do this. Now you won't have to do it again after this one, but I gotta start you out with this one, all right?
no problem.
So first question. A book that you have read that's been inspirational for you.
Which was actually a recent book that I just recently read, which was Heart Therapy, Purification of the Soul, Tuskia.
Mm,
It was really helpful for me as a book of reflection upon where the state of my heart is, where the state of my mind is,
mm-hmm,
how to work through things.
mm-hmm.
And I really recommend that particular book because it gets a Quran verse, it gets a Sunnah, um, and then it relates it back to Tazkiyah and how we can use these things to purify ourselves and make us better as an individual.
Right, and then the author of the book.
Um, Ali, his name is Doctor. What is it, Doctor? Hold on, because I actually have it right behind me. Um, Albagothi. Albagothi.
Okay. Well, we're gonna put that in. We're gonna make sure we put that in the comments so they know what it is, right?
Yeah.
When this comes out, and you can actually text that to me so I can make sure I spell it right because I'm gonna jack his name straight up, right?
And you can get it as a PDF also for free online. It is free online.
Oh
Okay.
wow. Okay. Now I know I'm gonna grab the book then because I grab all PDFs, especially free ones. And so All right, next. What man you know specifically? Now,
Mhm.
this is going to really kind of touch a lot of people that has been inspirational for you.
What man has been inspirational in my life
Hmm. That you know specifically.
that I know specifically?
Hmm.
Um, who has been really inspirational in my life specifically, actually, is, oh my goodness, why am I'm so horrible. Um, Iman Shadi. Um,
Mm-hmm.
he's inspirational in the sense of the word of trying so hard to better our community.
Hmm.
He really puts a lot of information out, a lot of content out. And one of the things that I really, really like about him is that he doesn't try to do everything by himself. He does pull other people in
Hmm.
and will tell you like, oh, I don't do that, but I know somebody who can. I know somebody who can do this. And he doesn't try to do everything himself. He
Hmm.
doesn't try to act like he know everything. And he pulls other people in to also help with healing our community from mental, emotional, and spiritual things that we have going on in our community.
Right. And the beautiful thing about this is that we just had Imam Shadid Muhammad on this show. We had a two-part series
Okay.
that's been happening at the time of this recording. Is a two-part series that we dove into a lot of good things. It was a pleasure to have him on the show.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's my man, so I'm gonna have to have him back, right?
Yeah.
So and so last but not least, and this is when we're gonna dive into these questions. What is your feeling or thoughts of the state of manhood today, especially black men, and I'm gonna get even more specific, black Muslim men?
Mhm. Um, and I say this with love. Um, our men are in a state of crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say that, and of no fault, only just us,
Mm-hmm.
but outside influences that are influencing us to be something else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they say, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that, towards the end of times, men will become like women and women will become like men.
Mm-hmm.
And you are seeing this by our men becoming more like women. And I don't mean in a sense literally like how transgenders, even though we are impacted by it,
Right.
but I'm talking a more of not providing maintenance. I actually just had a sister who her husband told her that she was lazy because she wanted to stay in the house.
Mm.
And I'm like, the best place for a woman is the home.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you should desire. You should desire that your wife wants to be home and not in the limelight and in out in front of men's faces. Providing is our right, but also is why you are chosen as a man. It says you are the man, you are the head of the household, you are the leader, you are the imam because of what you spend.
Mm-hmm.
That's a part of your identity as a man.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of resentment in our community in regards to men resenting women, rightfully so, in a lot of aspects, because of us starting to become more masculine.
Mm-hmm.
And of no fault of our own either, because then you have a society where they're trying to take men out of the picture
Mm-hmm.
and they're trying to put women in positions to be like men.
Mm-hmm.
Like even the whole idea of a woman running for president.
Mm-hmm.
So where does that leave men? Men are supposed to be the ones who lead,
Mm-hmm.
not be led.
It's interesting, because we dive into this conversation now, it's interesting that, we bring that subject up. And I know there are a lot of people making various different excuses why they don't want to vote for Vice President Kamala Harris, right,
Mhm,
as the president. Use a lot of different things, but the real for a man, in my opinion,
mhm,
right, so let me first put that out there. For a man, it's just hard to then have the head person of your society as a woman.
Mhm,
This is when people want to say why Hillary Clinton didn't get
mhm,
voted in, or maybe even why Kamala may or may not make it. At this time around herself, right? It's just hard for a lot of societies to have a woman as the head of state. There's been very few countries that has taken place,
mhm,
right? Very few, right? So I thought that was interesting when you said it. You know what I mean? That you know, for something like that to happen, there may be a weakening or a deregulation of
mhm.
men. And so when I get to this deregulation piece, we're going to talk about this as one of the main focal points I really wanted to bring you back on, because I
Mhm.
know you deal with this a lot, is emotional deregulation or lack of emotional regulation, which then brings about several different things, including impulse management issues, things of nature there.
Correct.
As well as when we start throwing clinical terminologies out there to make sure that they are, I mean, we don't really just want to dive into a DSM-6 or anything in nature there, right? But I want to be able to, in layman terms,
Mhm.
rebuke some of this usage like narcissism, antisocial behavior, things of that nature there. But first and foremost, because all this should possibly tie in, but I want to get to this emotional deregulation.
Mhm.
Let's kind of have a conversation about that, because you identify some traits in men that they say men start acting like women and women start acting like men. Give
Mhm.
us some of this understanding of emotional deregulation.
So, with emotional regulation, right? I think that one of the biggest issue is that people say, "I want someone who's emotional intelligent." Let's start right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
What they don't understand is emotional intelligence, like I had said before, doesn't mean you just know how to identify your emotions.
Okay.
I can teach a 4 or 5-year-old how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
They could tell you, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm jealous, and still have a tantrum,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's you're not regulated. Like so, children. So when you think of dysregulation, think of how children are.
Mm-hmm.
They have tantrums, they fall out, they're crying,
Right.
or you have some who they withdraw because they don't know how to deal with all of the feelings that are going on.
Mm-hmm.
Emotional regulations allows you to identify it, but also, okay, what am I going to do with all of these feelings
Mm.
I am having?
Mm-hmm.
Because no one is responsible for your feelings but you. See,
Mm.
what we'll try to do is, I'm entitled to my feelings. That means you should do something different so I don't feel this way.
Okay. Say
Not,
that again. Say that piece again. I like that one. Say that piece again.
yeah, they say, I feel this way, therefore you should do something different because I'm entitled to my feelings.
Wow.
You are entitled to your feelings, but that doesn't mean that I am the one who caused those feelings.
Right.
I'm not saying that it can't be,
Right.
but
It
it's
doesn't mean that even if I'm doing something that I can give you a different experience, right? But you still, what I'm hearing you say, that you still have to be accountable for how you feel and the things that you're going to do about it.
and how you're going to react. And then one of the examples this is how I usually like to explain that whole concept, right? I can line 5 people up in a row and just go straight down the row and slap all 5 people.
Mm-hmm.
God forbid I don't never do that.
Right.
Slap all five
Well,
people.
we talking hypothetically, y'all. We talking hypothetical.
How would each of those people respond?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to respond based off of who they are. See,
Mm-hmm.
this is what people don't understand. They be like, oh, people always want to talk about how I responded, but not what you did to make me respond that way. No, you responded that way because that's who you are. Because if I slap all 5 people, one person might just stand there. They might not say anything. Some
Mm-hmm.
people may walk away and be like, I'm not dealing with this. Somebody else may slap me back. Somebody may else beat me down. Someone else may pull out a gun, or somebody else may have a conversation. But like, no, in this kind of space, we keep our hands to ourselves.
Right.
Because that's who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not trying to say that any one of those are right, because however you decide to handle it is in accordance to the Quran and the Sunnah. Because
Right.
Quran and Sunnah has a cure for everything and how to regulate any kind of feelings that we are having.
Hmm. Okay. Now I ain't gonna tell you a lie. Hey, I got a moment then because, you know, we don't really realize that sometimes that we focus so much in on the do's and don'ts that we don't really realize that this thing is really has a cure and an answer for just the way of life that we're supposed to live.
Yeah, the Quran came as a cure
Mm-hmm.
for us, for the diseases that we have in our heart.
Mm-hmm.
Doubt, hypocrisy, all of those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about emotional irregulations, how was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Mm-hmm.
Was he yelling and screaming at the top of his lungs at everyone
Mm-hmm.
when people were doing things to him that was, horrific? And then when he didn't see them in a while, he inquired about them, which just caused them to take shahada.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you regulate yourself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in your expertise, your professional expertise, how did we get so far away? I know when talking with Imam Shadi Muhammad, he actually looking at men, he talked about three generations that are out here together: Generation X, Millennials, and Generation Z.
Mhm.
Right,
Yeah.
and it's like each generation seemed like it got worse.
Yes.
Right, and so how do you frame up the idea of it getting worse? Where did we go? I mean, sometimes we got to just take a look back to see where we came from in order to kind of understand where we're going and moving forward. Right? How did we get off?
First is taking men out the homes. Right. That's the first. When you men protect, that's their job. Their job is to protect.
Mm-hmm.
So when you pull men out of the home, right, you're pulling out. And listen, I want people to understand what I am talking about. Please do not be like, well, what if the man is like, I'm not talking about dysregulated men. I'm
Right.
talking about men who practice the Quran and the Sunnah to the understanding of the Sabbath. Men who show up every day as a man,
Mm-hmm.
regulated and well adjusted. Not perfect, regulated and well adjusted.
Right.
When you pull men out, men provide stability,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the success, and this is what women don't understand, with the success of you being a good mother is having a good husband. Because as women, we in and of ourselves are emotional beings.
Mm-hmm.
Men help stabilize emotions.
Right. So we can't have both of us up in here being emotionally regulated. Right.
We both can't be.
Right.
I should be able to break down and cry and all that kind of stuff. And you are a firm support.
Mm-hmm. But Michelle, let me tell you what that would lend a person to think, right? And this is something where some men have a problem. I remember, and I talk about this often. Renee Brown, right, the author, social worker, different things that entrepreneur stuff that she does. She has a deal that she really talking about vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really coming from a feminine perspective, a woman's perspective,
Mm-hmm.
right? So she had she was doing a book signing, and a guy came up to buy a few books for his wife and his children, his girls,
Mm-hmm.
but he told her, asked if she did any research on vulnerability for men,
Mm-hmm.
and at that point she said no, and he said, it's a problem because you see those three over there. He said they would rather see me die on top of my horse than to fall off of it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So then that means that for a man, what that translated how a man heard that is that I have no room in order to feel a particular way. I got to always come up stoic.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of whatever. I can't have feelings of maybe doubts from time to time or whatever, and then get the support that I need because somebody just really banking in on me. How does that, where does that play in what then looks like going to these clinical terminology now, the
Mm-hmm.
movement towards toxic masculinity?
Mm-hmm. So, and that's the difference between, I think, being emotional, right?
Mm-hmm.
And having emotionals and deal with, because as a man you're supposed to have emotional intelligence. Is not to say, because see, this is where people go wrong, is they look at it and be like, emotional intelligence, that means that you can't have emotions, you always got to deal with them correctly. No, because you're not perfect, no one's going to have that. And your family should be a source of support too, and your companion should be a source of support, and your father should be a source of support, and all of the community. We don't have a community either,
Mm.
which is problematic too. So it's not that you can't have feelings, and it's not that you can't fall off your horse. The problem is you can't go there and flail in your arms and just start rolling around in the mud,
Oh wow. Okay.
right?
that
You fall off.
was strong.
But what do they
It ain't
tell
that you can fall in. It ain't the thing that you can't fall off your horse. But when you get in there, you just start rolling around all in the dirt and just acting like, "Woe is me." I'm just,
you? Yeah,
either
can't nothing go right in my life. It's doomed. And it's like the failure, which I believe is first attempt in learning,
mm-hmm.
is necessary. It's necessary.
Wow, wow. They're in. I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna tell you what. That is the first time I heard it put in a way that I get it. I'm not talking about anybody else at this point, right? Just taking it from a personal standpoint. This is the first time that I heard it in a way that I get it. It's not that you can't fall off the horse. It's that you just can't sit down there and just roll around in the mud. If you fall off, you got to try to make some efforts of getting back on.
Mhm.
Maybe having the support of other people to help boost you back up on your horse or whatever, because your rightful place is your
It's
horse.
of course.
And I think the other thing they said that they would rather see me die on my sword, die with my shield, or die, with my sword, than me to fall off this horse.
Mhm.
Right. Well, you may fall off the horse, but I'm hearing you say you may even fall off the horse, but you still, because you are the man, you still have to get up, pick your shield up, pick your sword up, get back on top of that horse, and get back in the game.
Mhm. And me as your wife, what it may look like with support is you fell off. Okay, so you're starting to get up, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
might be like, oh, wait a minute, here's your sword, here's your shield. Let me make sure that
Here's the lunch to go with you,
food,
mm-hmm.
right? And then your friends may be the type that be like, okay, wait a minute, because you're too heavy for your wife. You can't put everything on her. But here we come and we're gonna put you back on.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
then the imams and the scholars and say, hey, you went the wrong way. You're supposed to come this way. You wind up going into a sinkhole over there.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's strong, sis. That's strong. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. You know what I mean? And I hope with, the brothers that are listening to this, and even some of the sisters who are listening to this, that you get the point that we still have to build community in order to be supportive of your man. And you have to encourage the building of a community, because within the Black culture, Michelle, I want to kind of run this back at you. Within the Black culture, which then has seeped over into the Black Muslim culture,
Mhm.
is that we've been told, man, I ain't messing with that nigga. I ain't doing this, I ain't doing that. Even though we're supposed to be Muslim, we still have these thoughts.
Mhm.
and I hope I'm not offending anybody when I say it how I'm saying it, but that's the thought,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so even though we have a guidance, we're still plagued by the thoughts that keeps us away from building real community. I got friends. I know dudes I know at the masjid, but we really ain't working like that. We can't really work together like that.
Yes. And that's important because see, one of the things about a community that that really, like, when I say it's so beneficial, is because one of the things it does is it weeds out a lot of bad apples, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I go into this community, I can't act any old kind of way that I want to act,
Mm-hmm.
because that brother's going to see. The problem is people like, I don't want to deal with it because they're the only ones that will be dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
But if they knew everyone was on the same accord,
Right.
if you're doing something, even if I wasn't there, I know it got checked.
Right. Strength in numbers. There's a little strength in numbers. You got backup somewhere.
Mhm. So you have men who are allowed to have these bad behaviors because nobody's checking them.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that just reminds me of when that shooting that happened outside of the masjid. And then Shadi said, too many people just going out here giving people shahadas and not really inquiring about them and just letting them loose in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the truth. We have no idea who's coming in, what anyone's doing. Somebody show up there at the masjid. You like, no one knows nobody's name. You don't know anything.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
It's surface level stuff. Or,
Right.
then people get married and be like, oh yeah, he a good brother. He a good brother because he said some Arabic words. He said Al-Fatiha.
Mm-hmm. Hey, and it's crazy because I on a recent show, the brother made a point. Um, there's a narration that many of us get wrong now that I'm learning that marriage is half your deen,
Mm-hmm.
right? He said no, the narration is a righteous wife marrying a righteous wife is half your deen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so a half your religion, a half your way of life, and fear Allah on the other half, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, okay, that's saying something a little different though. Now than just getting married, because then we don't have those. I'm gonna marry you. I met you today. I marry you tonight, and we divorced by the weekend,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a little bit more involved
Yes.
at that point. And so I think the weakening, and you can probably just discuss this even more, the weakening or the deregulation then starts with a lack of knowledge.
Absolutely.
Okay. Knowledge of what?
Now,
Pertaining first. Knowledge of what? Prioritizing it first. Give me a prioritized list.
so if anybody ever read the three fundamental principles, right?
Mm-hmm.
It says Etlam, have knowledge of four matters. Knowledge of Allah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. People
Knowledge of
people
God.
people
Mm-hmm.
be people be glazing over that. People don't understand that.
Right.
If you have knowledge of Allah and you love and fear him like you're supposed to, there's a lot of things you just not going to do.
Okay.
You're just not going to do because you're like, I fear the fire who fuel is is
Men
men and
stone.
stones. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be the men. Like,
Right.
right. Knowledge of your prophet, right? When you had knowledge of prophet and you love him like you should, like better than your own family, when you love someone, what do? You emulate them,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
those,
That's your model at
yeah,
that
that's
point.
your model.
That's
Every
your
time,
model.
because you love him so much. Well, what would the prophet do? What
Mm.
did he do? How did
I
he?
know Christians used to run around with that little band on their arm,
What would Jesus do?
WWJD, right? What would Jesus do,
Yes,
right? And so, and it was always amazing to me, even though I don't want Muslims just emulating other people like that. But it's like, man, we should have more right to that type of saying than anybody.
because we have the best of mankind as our example,
Right,
with his whole life documented.
right.
Have it. You just gotta look at it. We just said the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then knowledge of the religion with its proofs,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because when you know that, when you start to understand the religion, start to know the religion, there's certain things that you just not going to do because you know
Mm-hmm.
it's going to anger Allah, and you don't want to be of the people of the fire.
Right. So there's some deterrence. I mean, in these three things here, as you've spoken so far, we're talking about deterrence.
Mm-hmm.
This knowledge base does not. The knowledge is then going to deter you from certain things.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we are really ignorant of our religion,
Mm-hmm.
very, very ignorant,
Mm-hmm.
and or because I had a guy say this to me before. He said, "Oh, we can do this because Allah is merciful." I'm like,
Okay.
okay, all right.
Uh-huh.
But again, it says you don't know Allah because He's also just, and you can be merciful and have and be very stern in your
And
justice.
get spanked all at the same time. You can be merciful and still get spanked at the same time.
Because I'm spanking you out of my mercy, though. Because
Right.
I know if you keep going down this lane, this train of thought,
Mm-hmm.
going to be in a fire with you as men and stones.
Oh,
So
right.
I think that people, again, there's still a level of ignorance and disease that happens in the heart
Mm-hmm.
that needs to be rectified. Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that there's a lump of flesh that if it is correct, the whole body will be correct.
Right.
If it is not, then the whole body
Right.
won't.
It'll be corrupt. Mm-hmm.
And that is the heart.
So then how do we, and I'm still with emotional regulation,
Mm-hmm. So
right? We haven't gotten away from that.
nope.
I want people to understand we might have having a conversation. We still center this conversation around emotional regulation. How do we then merge? Because I think this is one of the problems too with people not going to a therapist or coaches or whatever to try to help them out in these arenas. How do we merge the clinical understanding of that with the spiritual aspect of it?
Mm-hmm. Well, because everything that happens to us impacts our spirituality. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you grew up in a home where there was abusive, drug infested, all those kinds of traumas, you become emotionally dysregulated,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that also impacts your heart because it impacts your thinking, and when I say thinking, I don't always mean cognitively, but also your thinking that happens in the heart. That's why from the heart the limbs move,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so that it influences everything that happens around you. So the spirituality piece is 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 filtering out the stuff that we talk about, because a lot of therapies be like, oh, in the mind, in the mind, in the mind, in the mind. And yes, your mind is impacted. I
Mm.
said, but all of the diseases and uh the core beliefs, they are residing in your heart.
Hmm.
My heart says men can't be trusted, and therefore my brain says
Don't trust men.
don't trust men. I
Mm-hmm.
can't I can't do this, I can't do that. In the heart, women are devious. So my brain is going to say stuff like, "Oh, you probably already got a backup because that's what women do." You know.
Right.
So your mouth is speaking, your brain is speaking, but those diseases are in the heart.
Mm. Wow. It's amazing. I was having a conversation with a client, this week, with a client and his wife this week, and I was letting them know, part of the problem that you guys got going right now, your heart isn't softened,
Mm-hmm.
and so therefore, if the heart is not taking it in, then the brain is already rejecting anything that's
Mm-hmm.
getting ready to come up. So if you saying, well, I want to try to do right, now you ain't trying to do right because your heart won't allow it to, even though you might have some curves or some nicks here and there, right? Your heart is still not tilled to be soft enough in order to receive that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I'm hearing you say at this point too. If we always talking about the brain. We're talking about the mind. I don't even want to say the brain,
Yeah,
right? Because I think those are two different things,
absolutely.
right? If we're talking about the mind, then the mind is being, from what I'm hearing you say, the mind is being really affected by the heart.
Yes.
So then now we can have brain damage,
Mm-hmm.
right? That then throws the brain, the chemical aspect of the brain off,
Mm-hmm.
which then may cause some issues,
Yes.
right? We're not going to dispute that. But what I'm hearing based upon the aspect of traumas,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what we're really talking about a lot about here is traumas. People really working from a position of traumas.
Mm-hmm.
And trauma can be from they just saw their mama kick it with somebody that or their daddy do something they had no business doing to outright out abuse,
Uh-huh.
right? That thing can range depending on the person,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe trauma could be, and I'm gonna ask you, is this a stretch, right? From a clinical point of view, I'm not putting you in a student of knowledge as far as a spiritual student of knowledge point of view, but from a clinical point of view,
Mm-hmm.
right? Would would trauma be um, something very much? Can we really consider that trauma? That's something that we can look at as very minute, right? I stumped my toe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And somebody put, the chair in front of the way in my way, and I stumped my toe. So now I'm just afraid of whatever, right? Give me a range of what trauma looks like, so people can really understand trauma.
So that's a good question. However, that is something I cannot answer. Right.
Bet,
And the
bet.
reason being is because when it comes to traumatic experiences, right, it's so many factors that lays the foundation for if this is going to be a trauma or not, right?
Mhm.
So, for example,
Well, I think you answering the question right now, sis. I ain't gonna tell you no lie. Now I think you answering it. So,
yeah, well, yes, because it also depends on like temperament, right? So all children come out with a temperament. Somebody
mhm,
may be more easygoing and like a lot of things just be like, ooh, and they just blow with the wind and sometimes be like, oh wait, that they said something to me wrong. You
mhm.
know, the real thing about trauma, what people don't understand, especially childhood trauma, I want people to really, really get this. It's really not always about what the child experienced. It's about how the people respond to it when they find out they are close to them.
Explain that a little bit more. Explain that a little bit more.
So,
That
for,
last part of that.
for example, growing up, and I like to use myself an example, so it's real life. Growing up, I was sexually abused, right?
Mhm,
And when it all came out, it was like my mom started blaming me. She said that I was sleeping with her men, all this kind of stuff. Mind you, I was 9. She said I
mhm,
was doing all these things. It made me start to act out after that. No one would have guessed before then. It wasn't until after the response that I got that's when it became difficult. And that's because and growing up, I didn't know that it was wrong
mhm.
until someone told me that it was wrong. Then it was like, oh wait, I was abused. Oh my goodness. And then that's when it became problematic. But if someone would have intervened in the beginning, when it all came out and said, hey, that was wrong that this happened to you. This is how you had good interactions with men. This is how blah, 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 blah. It would have changed the trajectory of what I had experienced.
Hmm.
Because in the reality, we teach children what is right and wrong. Some things we know because of our fitra. We
Mhm,
just know that it's wrong.
mhm,
But certain things, it may override it because that's all we know. That's all we were experiencing. That's all we exposed to. Think about those cults and things like that. Sometimes they don't realize that this is abusive because that's what they were raised in. Not
mhm.
always. Sometimes you realize it, but not always. A lot of times they don't realize it because that's what they was raised in. Then when outside entities come and be like, this is wrong, then that's when everybody then it'd be like up in arms problems.
Okay. So then let me ask it this way, because I'm gonna give it something probably a little bit poor or poverty. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I've heard a lot of people say, growing up, man, I didn't even know we were poor. We just,
Mm-hmm.
this is what we were doing, right?
Yeah.
It isn't until I started hearing them other people saying, man, y'all don't have this, that
Mm-hmm.
then that's when it became. So it wasn't a trauma. The poverty wasn't a trauma when you didn't know that this was the issue. Would
Mm-hmm.
that be a case?
Like that, yes. People like, oh, I didn't even know, until people say, yo, you're supposed to have this, you're supposed to have that, and then that's when you start to hate this or hate that, and you start to strive for other things and start to get other things. And in reality, you were okay. You were okay. And when I say, when I'm, and let's be clear, when we talk about poverty, I'm not talking about the children who you can see their lungs through their chest and their ribs through.
Right. All that. Right. Now we ain't talking about that. Right.
And I talk about that because that's clearly evident that they're traumatized.
Right.
But even
Because at that point they're having physical trauma.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
and it's still emotional and mentally, abusive and things like that. But
Right.
even still, when they get help, they come out better because of how people responded to it.
Mm-hmm.
They had those what is it called? The missionaries, they go and
Right.
they feed them, and then they become well adjusted
Mm-hmm.
because of how people responded to the trauma.
Right.
What we do is we had trauma, and then we respond by adding more trauma to the trauma.
Okay. So the response is never about healing. The response is more trauma. Add more trauma to it.
Yep, that's our response. Add more trauma. Oh, he beat my daughter. I'm about to go over there and I'm gonna beat him down. And the next thing you know, she'd be like, all men are violent. I
Right.
don't trust them.
Right.
I
Or
feel
is
safe.
mm-hmm. Okay. Or somebody drink. I'm having a bad day, so I'm gonna get a drink.
Yes.
Right. Then I'm adding more trauma to the situation because now my coping skills aren't good. Because that's what I'm hearing you. Because
Mhm.
coping skills really is nothing but the form of getting to healing,
Yeah.
right? And so, and if I have bad coping skills, then that's just really me putting trauma on top of trauma.
But I'm gonna add more, even more to that because coping skills are good.
Okay.
I like them. But coping skills will fail you if you don't change your way of thinking and believing about what's happening.
Okay.
Right. So one of our biggest issues that I find in our community too is that we love to make up stories.
Okay.
Right. We'll add to the story. So for example, we'll do something like, yeah, uh like for example, when me and some companions, we was talking about this gala that's supposed to be happening. It was just all sisters. So here go some of the other sisters. It's giving who gonna be there kind of vibes. Okay, so listen. Now that you already had that negative thought about other women, right?
Mm-hmm.
That already tells me how you view women. So now if you do go, you're gonna be standoffish
Right.
because you already
Because
have
you
a
already set up in your mind what it's going to be.
when in reality, whatever happened with you and other women, that was between you and other women. That
Mm-hmm.
got nothing to do with these women. You creating a story, and then what you're gonna do is play it out. It's called self-fulfilling prophecy. They're gonna play it all the way out.
Wow.
True.
So now, because we get ready to end in a second, and I don't want you to end on a word being used. Then they say, somebody just running with it. Self-fulfilling prophecy, right? It's self-fulfilling prophecy. It's just like it get gone because they heard everyone's favorite therapist say it, and now they just want to regurgitate it. Now,
Right.
give them an understanding of what is self-fulfilling prophecy, so they can kind of understand what it is.
Okay. So it's two things because I want to add this to it. So we have self-fulfilling prophecy,
Okay.
and then we have uh confirmation bias.
Okay.
Okay. So and
Okay.
the reason why I want to get both of them because they're so similar
Uh-huh.
that you should know because you still may be mislabeled. So
Okay.
a self-fulfilling prophecy. And what I mean by that, we do not know the unseen. So please don't be like, oh, she's saying we know the unseen. No,
Exactly. Exactly.
that is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is this. If you believe, like for example, I started my own business. If you believe that you can start your own business, you're going to behave in a way to start your own business.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that it's going to come to fruition, but that's what you're going to do. If you believe that all men cheat, you're going to pick, nag until they cheat. I'm not saying that they will, because again, how they behave is who they are. But you're going to keep picking and you're going to find a way to make it as if that person is cheating. And it could have been an innocent exchange. See, look, I saw you hug your cousin. That's cheating. You know that's haram. We're not supposed, they're not no mahram. And it maybe had just been an accident because
Mm-hmm.
we're socialized in our culture that cousins are family.
Mm-hmm.
So in your mind, see, I knew it. But that's also confirmation bias, right? So confirmation bias is you think something to be true, so everything confirms that.
Okay.
So I believe you a thief. So when you pick that up, you was trying to steal it.
You trying to steal it. Mm-hmm.
You was trying to steal it. And so they so similar that sometimes it's easier to move back and forth in between the two.
Mm-hmm.
But one of them is with self-fulfilling prophecy is more of your behavior of seeing something through because you know it because you think it's true. And confirmation bias is more about you searching for what you believe to be true.
Okay.
If I believe that God is real, everything is evidence of God. If I believe that God doesn't exist, everything is proof that he doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. That's confirmation bias.
Yes, that's confirmation bias.
Mm-hmm.
So because the sun rotated, well, because the earth rotated around the sun, that's proof of God.
Right. Some
Well,
people go with that, right?
yeah,
Because the earth rotates around the sun, that means it's proof of God. Somebody say, well, because the
no,
earth rotates around the sun, that's a proof of science,
yes,
right?
it's proof of science. So everything.
Which doesn't make any sense to me. But I get what is in the understanding of what we have context we're using right now. This is how people just have a confirmation bias on what it is, whatever they believe it to be, that's what it's going to be, and
And
they
it's
just need to.
not evidence
And everything's going to be a proof
for
to
that.
that which they believe is going to be.
Mm-hmm. And so that's why it's so important to get the help that you need so that you can come back and stop making up stories. That's
Mm-hmm.
why I said making up the stories, because the stories are based off of what you believe to be true and not what the evidence is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For
And
whatever reason it
oh
is.
my God, because sis, that's why I'm gonna stick a pin in it, right? Because you gonna come back, so we ain't got to get it all. We ain't got to get it all today, right?
Right.
But that's amazing how you just said that. It's like when somebody done something wrong to a person and it was unintentional, right? But you initially thought it was intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had a conversation, say a person say, well, that wasn't something, I apologize. It wasn't really what I was intending to do. Right. I had people still say, well, it still hurt. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But okay, but I just told you that wasn't, shouldn't there be some mercy or grace given in the fact that I just said that wasn't what I was trying to do?
Mm-hmm. But even still, and I'm gonna take it a step further, just because it hurt doesn't, and just because it wasn't, it may have looked similar to your own pain.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like I'll give you a great example because I love to use myself.
Okay.
I always have my phone on silent. My phone be on silent all the time.
I know.
And that's because I do a lot of therapy and the phone be ringing. And so I'll turn the ringer off and
Mm-hmm.
I'll forget to turn it back on. And then after a while, it just became a lifestyle that it's just always off.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so let's just say I get in a marriage where a guy been cheated on before, and every time when he did it, that's when she went MIA. So then
Mm-hmm.
now my phone, I'm not answering the phone. What, you cheating?
Right.
No. Like, no, it's just, well, that hurt my feelings that you didn't answer. That's not a bad thing. And that's
Right.
why I tell people, before you go and say your feelings are hurt, one, ask yourself, was what happened a bad thing? Was it a bad thing?
Gotcha.
Answer the phone. That's not
Right.
a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing I didn't answer the phone. It's just a bad thing when it wasn't answered before with somebody else that they were doing something they had no business doing.
Yes. So
Mm-hmm.
that's not me. So now it's, hey, that's when you be open and honest about what you are dealing with and struggling with. Hey, it really bothers me that you don't answer the phone. Okay,
Okay.
I understand. However, I do therapy, I do this, I do that. How can we work through this? Because that's a you issue. It's not a me issue.
Right. Right. All right.
I'm here,
So,
I'm here with you. I'm
right.
supporting you, but it's not a me
But
issue.
that's not a me issue. All right. So, hey, look, we're going to stick a pin in it today.
No.
Right. Tell them how, again, let everyone know how they can find their favorite therapist, everyone's favorite therapist. How
So
can they find you?
So you can go on my Facebook page, which is Michelle Renee Davis. I use it for easy to be able to find me. On YouTube is Everyone Favorite Therapist on YouTube. You can also go. I had two websites. I had one, which is wfmmh.com. You can go in there to book an appointment or schedule an appointment. If you have Medicare and Medicaid, it's also actually best to reach out to me to schedule an appointment, because I do it through my nonprofit organization, which also is open and operational, and you can donate money to it, so that, because eventually what I'm trying to do is help people who have addiction to drug and alcohol, find housing and things like that.
Okay.
And that's rest-recovery.org. So you can always donate to there. Go on that website to see things that we are doing in order to heal our community. And
Wow.
to call is 484-841-9595. And so that's all the things I'm trying to do in the community in
All
Charlotte.
right. Well, thank you again for being, such a great guest. My expert guest, you know what I mean? And of course, we're going to, at the Get Made podcast, we want to continue to bring good content, bring expert people here, because we need our leaders, our thought leaders, our community leaders to be a little bit more known, a little bit more active, letting you know them, letting you know that they are reachable, that they can be touched, so
Absolutely.
as to get the help that is needed in order to let's live a better life. The way we're just trying to be in a position of being at peace, trying to
Absolutely.
live a better life. So, Get Made podcast, of course, streaming on YouTube at Get Made Podcast.
Hmm.
Of course, on Facebook, you hit me at Hassan Clay,
Hmm.
and we stream every Monday at 7 p.m. 7 p.m. on the dot. And of course, with grounded masculinity, one of the core principles of grounded masculinity is consistency. That we have is going to be consistency. So we are going to be consistent every Monday.
بإذن الله.
Inshallah. So y'all gonna have a great week. We're gonna see you guys back again next week for the Get Made podcast at 7 p.m. And we're gonna see you back, sister, in about another 3 to 4 or 5 weeks.
Yes,
And we're gonna ask some more questions. We're gonna get some more good information, good content. All
inshallah.
right. Y'all have a great one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.